Good morning, everyone. It's 16th of July, Tuesday morning, and welcome to this week's Tuesday Morning Coffee Club. This week we're talking about what is innovation, featuring Nick Roach. We're also going to test a British theory. There's something called Murphy's Law, and Murphy's Law says anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And the beauty of working from home is you never know what's going to happen. And I'm expecting a furniture delivery this morning. I was told it would arrive between 9:30 and 12:30. It's 10 a.m. at the moment. So it would be absolutely typical if it does arrive in the next 30 minutes during this live show. If it does, I will leave us in the hands of Nick to talk about innovation for a few moments. Nick, I'm sure that won't happen, but let's see. But yeah, it's a new week, it's a new government, and there are new champions of the European Cup. So congratulations to Spain. Today's shirt is a Spanish company called Desigual, and I'd like to think the design shows the flair of the Spanish, and the lines going everywhere shows the match plan of the English. So congratulations to Spain, European champions. Enough football. Let's get into today's great subject. What is innovation? I've been really looking forward to this one. And the reason for that is we're talking today about a subject that I've crafted my own personal career around. A little about my journey in innovation. I did my second degree at Cranfield University in innovation and creative problem solving while I was working at a company called BA Systems, working on future innovation concepts for aircraft and for the aviation industry. I then moved to an organisation called Northwest Aerospace Alliance, where we developed an innovation centre, and then on to an organisation called Northwest Development Agency and Business Link, always developing innovation projects and innovation schemes for small and medium and large businesses to help them grow by thinking differently. So innovation has always been in my blood, and during my studies and my practical career, I came up with two different definitions for innovation. I think it's important that we start on these because we get so many people saying my project is innovative, my project's innovative because, but what we've got to differentiate is innovation in the broader context and innovation in the context of this specific visa program. So straight away, my first definition of innovation, as you can see on the screen now, was to gain benefit by doing something different. And there are three key phases there. To gain benefit, that means you've got to gain something from the project. It's got to give you something that other things don't give you. By doing, if you don't do it, you've got nothing but an idea. You have to actually turn your ideas into something practical and tangible. And then we've got something different. If it's the same, it's not innovative by definition. So my first definition was to gain benefit by doing something different. But then I love mathematical equations. I love simplicity. So I came up with a second definition, which is a simple sum that you can now see on the screen. Something different plus someone who wants it plus someone who can sell it. And again, three quite key components there. It's got to be different. Someone's got to want it. That's where the benefit comes in. Is how it maps over onto the previous definition. But you also need someone who can sell it. If you don't have someone who can sell it, then you are purely an inventor, not an innovator. You have to have a means to get your projects to the people who are going to use them. So they were my two definitions. To gain benefit by doing something different, and something different plus someone who wants it, plus someone who can sell it. But then, of course, we have the definition of innovation in the context of this specific visa route. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you the main things we need to think about before bringing Nick in. So this is probably the most important slide you will see, and I'll refer back to this slide throughout this session. Innovation. These are the typical questions we ask ourselves. Is it solving a problem? How different is it to what already exists? Is it easily replicable? These two bits are key. Who has developed the clever bits? I'm not going to go into it in any more at the moment because I want to save that for the conversation with Nick. And then last but not least, is the innovation essential to the business? So they're the five things that we are going to be looking at and discussing today in the context of how an endorsing body assesses a plan. So with no further ado, what I'd love to do is bring in a person who unfortunately has to speak to me every single day, but he's my business partner. We get extremely well, I think, the world of him. Nick, you are now on screen. Welcome to our Tuesday morning coffee club. Nick,
Richard, thanks very much for that.
you're welcome, Nick. You're welcome. Again, not an unfamiliar face, that's for sure. Nick, can we just start quickly by letting everyone out there know? I've told them a little bit about my background, but just so they understand a bit about us and our business, you've got a very, very strong background in business support. Any chance you can mention just a little bit about that before we get into innovation?
Yeah, sure. So after an early career stutter, which I'm sure many people have had, I was very lucky to work with an excellent manufacturing company, and got involved with I went up through the technical route through the company, and eventually ended up project managing new product development, which was a fantastic learning ground, because all that was about taking an idea from the marketing team and developing that into a product. So going through that whole design process right through to implementation and sale when it was handed back to the sales team. So, working with a team of engineers, going through that whole design process, what we think would work, what wouldn't work, both from an engineering context, but also from a customer context as well. And the company I was with at the time, we placed a lot of emphasis on the user, in particular, which has always stayed with me. So from that sort of manufacturing experience, I then went into service sector, and whilst the processes are sort of slightly different, the principles are exactly the same. It's all about being lean. It's all about being efficient. It's all about listening to the customer. What's going to work? What's practical? What isn't practical? So that sort of formed the basis of my experience, if you like. I'm sort of more hands-on. Rich has had all the academic stuff to support his practical experience as well. Mine is almost entirely practical. So, innovating in a service-based business, I would suggest, involves very, very similar principles to that of manufacturing. So then a bit later on in my career, sort of advised lots and lots of usually small businesses on how to innovate, how to go from startup into a growth business. So got quite a lot of experience in hundreds and hundreds of business plans and projects, and helped quite a number of businesses to go through that development phase.
Yeah, so the interesting thing there again is and I always forget this, Nick. You always think of of your latter days being more relevant to the early days because you've helped so many SMEs grow and so many businesses grow. Then I always think back, you've actually been through that whole product development cycle as well. So you know what it takes to take something from concept to sales, to invoices. And I always forget the relevance of that. So Nick, thanks for adding that part in as well. So again, hopefully people watching now have got an idea of the experience of the founders of Innovation International and Geminus Innovation, and how our skills complement each other. We're going to move on quite quickly now you understand a bit about Nick and where he's come from. And before we go into the definitions of innovation, one thing that we often see, particularly on social media channels and in conversations, is how things have changed since the innovator founder route came in. And in all honesty, the rules haven't changed at all. Actually, I'm going to throw this Nick's way in a moment, but my opinion is the rules haven't changed at all. But as things have moved forward, two things have happened. Home Office have provided more clarity on the rules. that have allowed them, that have made them feel a little tighter, but in all honesty, they're just clearer now, they're better defined. But secondly, with the removal of the startup program, propositions have to be a little more developed, a little more advanced before they can be approved. Nick, what are your thoughts on any changes between the old program that had startup and innovator and the innovator founder route? Do you see or perceive any? Sorry, do you see any large or even medium-sized changes in the programs?
No, I would agree. I would agree with what you've said, and I think what the startup visa did was enable people to maybe, do more customer, more product, more market research, whereas there's sort of less flexibility with that with the innovator founder. When we and I know we'll come on to this very shortly, but I think if when we see a proposition, we would expect a lot of that market research, that customer validation to have actually taken place. So I guess it's there was more risk with the startup visa, and I think that was by design. So if there's one key thing I would say about the innovator founder visa, it's not the removal of the 50K, which most people think. It's actually that preparedness for the proposal. Whereas we could have a little more flexibility with the startup. I think there's some of that flexibility has been removed.
I think so, I agree totally. I think this is me paraphrasing a little, but if the government, if we go back many years, I don't know if this is still the case, but this was always seen as a route to a route about economic investment, as opposed to a route about immigration. So effectively, the government wanted to see successful businesses getting to a position where they're employing people, paying taxes, they've got good income, good revenue, and so on. And I think if you look at the statistics, there was probably a much higher failure rate on the startup route than was expected. And by failure rate, what I mean is people transitioning to a different route, or people not meeting the criteria for transition onto the full innovator or the innovator founder visa. And I think you said something really important there, Nick. You said it allowed more risk, and there was risk from our and the Home Office perspective, but it also allowed the applicant to take more risk. And you said something so important when you were talking about your early days, listening to the customer. Now, on some of the startup programs and applications, there was very little customer engagement. Didn't know who the customer necessarily was at that point, and it gave you that time to investigate in a bit more detail and to find out. But now you'd be expected to know who the customer is, to engage with them. So effectively, it's not a bad thing. It just makes you do a little more work before you apply, but that in turn maximises your chance of success, and then maximises the chance of a successful outcome to the Home Office as well, which is good for everyone, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks for that, Nick. Let's move on. I'm just going to pop back quickly to our slide that talks about innovation for assessors, and I've got these on the screen. Nick, you can't see the screen, of course, at the moment because you can only see our Zoom call. But when you open an application, what's going through your head when you start to think to yourself, is this innovative or not? We're going to go back to that screen and I'll work specifically through those points in a moment. But when you're opening an application for the first time, what's going through your head in terms of thinking, is this innovative or not?
So I think it's at the very start. It's very, very helpful. As with any good business plan, it tells a story.
Yeah.
So at the very start of the plan, what I do like to see, and we do see it on some plans. There's a really good story and a really good narrative around the actual innovation itself. It's not very good for us, but if you get into page 20 before someone's telling you actually what the thing is and why it's innovative. So really good opening gambit, really, in terms of the innovation is really helpful. I think if it's then if it's quite a technical innovation, one of the first things I do, I think we'll maybe talk around this a little bit more later, is I then go straight to the CV of the applicant,
Yeah.
because what I need to do in my head is relate the applicant to the innovation, in terms of knowledge, background, experience, and skills, because that's a really, really important aspect of this particular visa route. So those are I would say, the two key things. One is a clear story, a good articulation of the innovation itself,
Yeah.
but then a really strong immediate link to the applicant.
I agree as well. And obviously, I'm not going to put a Venn diagram up, Nick. You know I love Venn diagrams, but the crossover
It's the first time for everything, Richard.
the crossover between innovation and viability is so important. And I'm just going to put my old definitions on the screen again. Someone who wants it and someone who can sell it, you could argue, are viability points. Gain benefit by doing, their viability points. But the key thing here is there's a big crossover between innovation and viability, and I always look at the CV first, because if someone's selling a product, a medical product, into the NHS, I'd expect them to have some knowledge of or experience within the health sector, because it's such a hard sector. I mean, same with aerospace. You're not going to sell a product into aerospace without having any knowledge of the aerospace sector, because it's so notoriously hard to get in.
What I would add to that, Richard, is relevant experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So
just because someone has actually worked in that sector, doesn't always make it relevant.
Absolutely. Again, in the aerospace sector, my background, booking someone onto a plane is not going to give you a knowledge of how the baggage handling system works. So again, absolutely. Nick, you said something else, and you said the first thing you look at. Do you know, the other thing that surprises me is how many applications we get for physical products that don't have a visualization of the product. They don't have a diagram or a picture or an image. And I mean, when you read, if you think about reading a book, you can have pages and pages of text, or you can have text that's split up with images and diagrams. And I'm not talking about the useless, or when I say useless, the pointless stock diagrams that just break up the text. I'm talking about a meaningful diagram that tells you something. It helps you understand what the innovation is so much more, I think. But Nick, let's dive into the points we put up here. So I put the slide back up. Is it solving a problem? So one of the first things for us with regards to innovation is it solving a problem? And I mean, the one thing I love to see is, I love the word pain point. For me, innovation is solving someone's pain point. Someone's finding something difficult, and this is aimed at making their life easier. What are your thoughts on, I'm just going to get that definition back, is it solving a problem? Anything specific you like to see there around what problem it's solving? Nick, let's touch on 2 points here, because they tie in anyway. Is it solving a problem, and how different is it to what currently exists? What are your thoughts on how different it has to be, and whether it is solving a problem or whether it's just something nice to have?
Yeah, and this is a key part of that initial articulation of the innovation. Real clarity around the problems that are being experienced by customers is really, really important. And we unfortunately do get a lot of applicants, a lot of applications where it goes straight into the technical solutions. It's AI, it's blockchain, it's this, that, and the other, but without really getting to the nub in very clear terms exactly what the problem is and how competitor products are not solving that problem.
Yeah, I
So
think
I think that's really, really important.
I'd agree. And by the way, if anyone is watching this live at the moment, please feel free to throw questions in to the chat box, because we will do our best to answer them. So please throw the questions away. Throw the questions into the chat box. We'll tie them in if we get a few minutes at the end as well. Again, I think we sort of mentioned this already. I think a business plan, I always think of it like a good book or a good film. And when you're watching a film, they don't solve the problem before you even know what the problem is. How does the film start? You and get a visualization of someone doing something, and a challenge happens, a problem happens, and then within the film, normally around the middle, you need the solution to that problem. Clearly, you want to know what the solution is quicker than the middle of the business plan. But I think that story and that route really does work. Um,
Yeah,
but
and with regards to how different it is, so actually in the guidelines that it does talk about being unique. Um, this is the Home Office guidelines. Unique is it's a very powerful word taken literally.
yeah,
But I think it's, whilst it's very difficult to create something that is entirely unique. Um, but I think what it definitely has to be is differentiated.
yeah. Do you know what? One thing I love, Nick, is metrics, because it's great if you can say. And we always used to measure things when we were designing cockpits. We always used to measure things on button clicks. And you never want more than 3 button clicks to be able to get somewhere. And ideally, you want fewer than 3 if it's a critical system. So, yeah, I mean, if you can say, okay, the current system, and let's take, for example, let's look at our old process for assessing applications. When we used to assess an application and we used to write the letter ourselves, it might be the case that the physical process took 2 to 3 hours per application. But by bringing in automation, we've got that down to 30 minutes per application. And I think when you have a metric that says the old system used this measure, the new system uses this measure, what you can then work out is, would someone pay for that difference? And what would they pay? So if something, I mean, if a manufacturing process used to take 5 days and you got it down to 4.5 days, they're probably not going to pay much for it. But if you get 5 days down to 1 hour, then all of a sudden you've got something that someone would pay a more considerable sum of money for. So I always like metrics in terms of saying that's what it was, this is what it is now, so we can see a tangible difference. But also, again, going back to what you said before, Nick, listening to the customer. If you've got end users who are telling you, this is a problem we have, and yes, we would purchase that solution off you, and we would spend the sum of money that you're proposing, then we're starting to bark up the right tree.
Yeah, in a lot of plans, we'll see statements like, the UK market is sort of crying out for this solution. The UK market struggles with this, it struggles with that, and I'm sat there thinking, does it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There seems to be lots of solutions out there that, you don't hear or read or see anything that says that's a real problem. So it's one thing stating what the problem is, what the customer problem is. It's quite another thing validating it.
Absolutely.
So, a sort of a recommendation is, the closer that you can get to the customer who is the most likely target customer for your product or service, and to get that validation, it is really powerful. Now, I appreciate, for a lot of people who haven't got access to the UK in terms of customers and markets, that can be difficult.
Yeah.
But
we have LinkedIn now. We have so many ways to get in touch with people.
There are ways to do it,
Absolutely.
So what I would say is, without that customer and market validation, that presents a challenge.
That's the big thing.
When we're trying to assess the innovation aspect.
I'm going to break what I call the BBC and ITV rule here, I think, and we might go fractionally over 30 minutes because it's 10:24 already. We've got 6 minutes to go. We've got a little bit more to talk about, so we probably will just run over the 30 minutes today. But Nick, let's just touch on the other points very quickly if we can. Is it solving a problem? How different is it to what exists? We've sort of covered that. And Nick, you said it's very hard to come up with something totally unique. In the same way, we're not looking for a tiny change, but I think it's important to measure things in terms of the benefit, a tangible difference in the outcome. Get it from 5 days down to 1 hour, if you can. Is it easily replicable? What we're looking at here, really, and this is a question we get asked quite a bit, Is it easily replicable? Nick, we've got to spend about a minute or two on each of these points now, so I'll
Okay,
fire with my
okay.
thoughts, and then I'll go over to yours if I can. For me, what that's actually saying is that someone with a fairly general or even semi-skilled set couldn't take that idea and easily copy it in a couple of days. If they were to replicate it, it would take some research and some development and something more substantial. What are your thoughts on the easily replicable rule?
So, obviously, because of time limitations, one key thing for me is if someone has come up with an idea and saying, "Yeah, I think I can do that," so I'm going to outsource the project to a third party
Yeah,
provider, and someone else can provide that solution. Well, what's to stop someone else doing exactly the same thing? So, I think that
yeah,
easily replicable sort of challenge really is much harder if the knowledge and experience and the skill lies with the individual that can not
yeah.
only develop and implement that initial innovation, but carry on with that innovation,
Absolutely. Carrying on a
carry
big
on.
thing. Nick, I'm going to throw in a really stupid example here. So if you make cakes and you say I'm going to make a cake with a cherry on the top, any cake maker could copy that. But if you're going to make your cake in a different way and you can use a different manufacturing process, and it's not something that's easy to copy. I'm not suggesting making cakes is a good project. That's a silly example. But if you just put a cherry on the top, it's something that's easy to copy, and therefore not the type of project that would be supported. Really, really
And
simple.
just a final quick point on this as well. I think it's important to look at this from two aspects. One aspect is if you haven't got something that's genuinely differentiated, you are going to struggle in the marketplace anyway,
Absolutely.
regardless regardless of the innovative founder visa. You are going to struggle if you haven't got a compelling value proposition. You're going to struggle. You're also going to struggle in the visa context because if we can't see it's properly differentiated, then we're going to struggle with meeting the innovation criteria.
Absolutely, and so will the Home Office. I mean, the whole purpose of this route is to encourage you to have successful businesses within the UK. And a lot of the
Yeah.
businesses we refuse are because they will not be successful, and therefore we're trying to save you the investment, the heartache, the headache, the stress of coming over and having a business that fails. So, Nick, let's just go on to those last couple of points. So, Nick, you touched on this briefly. Who has developed the clever bits? And what we're really looking for, this goes back to the person's experience. What we're not looking for is someone who comes up with a very generic concept but doesn't explain or provide the detail of how it's going to work and they simply outsource that to a third party. Now, if I'm designing a widget, a device, an object, it's okay for me to have someone make that for me as long as I've given them the detail on what it is and how it should be made. That's sort of my best broad brush definition. What's yours in terms of the applicant developing the majority of the IP?
Yeah, so I think we touched on this before, and for me, it's all around the knowledge, the skills, and the experience of of, of that individual
Yeah,
with implementing the plan. So clearly, what we do recognise is that any one individual, or even a small team, a core team, are not necessarily going to have the full range of skills to take that idea, to implement the innovation, and to grow it into a sustainable business. So, at some point, you are going to need to get additional either technical skills or soft skills
absolutely,
into the business. So we do
absolutely.
recognise that.
I,
But right at the core of the innovation, that knowledge, expertise has to be present within
yeah.
the applicant or the core
I
team.
think for me, it's about having a detailed plan, not a concept.
Yeah,
And we do get a lot
yeah,
of conceptual applications. Nick, we've got questions, we've got points. I'm going to spend another 5 minutes going through these in a moment. But the last point here now, and this is such an important one to me, is the innovation essential to the business? And previously we've had applications where the person may be a consultant and they said, oh, by the way, I'm also doing this. But where this is the innovative bit, not the consultancy. Now, if you do that and it turns out that your business is 75% consultancy, 25% the innovative bit, then that doesn't meet the criteria. The innovation has to provide the majority of the income to the business, although it may take a while for that to embed itself within the business if there's a development period. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts on that specific rule and how you interpret it?
absolutely. So uh, I think one thing that's happened with some businesses that we've seen is, you'll take they will naturally take the path of least resistance.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if there's work coming in on the consultancy angle, it's quite easy to sort of stay within the comfort zone, and but ultimately that will lead to an issue because we have to see that innovative element of the business progressing. We have to see it generating revenue and profit. Otherwise, we're heading for a bit of trouble.
yeah,
So
absolutely. Uh,
yeah, that's. I mean, ideally, obviously, what we would like to see is the whole of the business is entirely that innovative element. We do understand that there are other things bolted onto that possibly, but it has to be the real
yeah.
emphasis and thrust of the business.
And of course, when it comes to the point where you're judged for settlement or judged for continuation, then you will be judged against what you said in the original plan. Now, if things don't go to plan, you can potentially change it as long as it remains within the criteria for this visa route, and it has to be approved again. So please don't think
Yeah,
that
just
you're,
yeah,
it's,
just one key thing there, Richard, as well. When it does come to settlement issue, or even same business continuation, we will need to see evidence that actually
oh,
that
absolutely.
innovation has generated that level of sales.
Yep, yep,
You,
yep,
you,
yep.
you will need to differentiate between the revenue streams.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw a few things in here quickly. So I'm going to dive across to the questions. Thanks for everyone's time, by the way. Again, I have broken my own rule, but another 4 minutes before we come to an end on this show. I think it's such an important subject, and don't mind going over on this one. But again, an important note from our very own James that's coming here, and it's worth just reiterating the Home Office criteria for innovation. The applicant must demonstrate they have a genuine and original business plan that meets new or existing market needs and or creates a competitive advantage. That's the first point. Business propositions should be able to demonstrate a clear and compelling unique selling proposition. Bear with me a moment. There's the call I was expecting. Decline. And the concept for innovation within the business should demonstrate a business proposition that's not easily replicable by others and can demonstrate reasonable barriers of market entry. So it's so important to remember those Home Office criteria. If you want to see those again, Google innovator founder guidance for endorsing bodies, and you will find all of this in that document. A really, really good document to see. But the other thing I'm going to mention before I go into the questions is we don't just endorse. We provide a range of business services, additional business services, to help our applicants develop successful businesses. Yes, we endorse. Our additional services aren't mandatory, but we have a pool of experts there to help you. So please don't feel that you are in the journey totally alone. If you do want extra help can be provided. Now I'm just going to whip down these questions very, very quickly. I'll read them to myself before we read them out. How do you prove, Nick, I'll throw these your way. How do you prove you've got the right skills? For example, you might have experience in the field, but how do you convince the assessor you have the right experience to do that project?
So in two ways, well, in three ways actually. One is a really good CV. Secondly, is weaving that skills, knowledge, and experience into your plan. And thirdly, if you get to the point of an interview, it's being able to, articulate those skills, that knowledge and experience that has to come through in the Zoom interview with the assessor.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, I'm going to add something as well, but I'm going to read out the next question before I do that. So someone's also said, for service-oriented business model, I don't have work experience, but I've experienced these things. So I've listed the pain points and created a solution. Would that be considered innovation? Now, we can't say whether it's considered innovation because we don't know what it is. But in terms of the experience, I talked about selling into the NHS. I've not got a medical background. But if I wanted to sell our product into the NHS, what I'd do is I'd go to them and I'd talk to them and I'd interview them and I'd find out about their pain points and whether our solution fits. So where you don't have experience, engagement with the target market base, I guess, is a good substitute.
It is. I would suggest you need to do that a lot more extensively than someone who's, say, worked in that sector for
Yeah.
10 years and has got that experience. if you've had an idea within that sector, but you're not necessarily experienced in the sector, that's going to take a whole lot more research.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So research, but again, actually engaging with the end users. Nick, we've got a few more questions, but I think we'll be through these fairly quickly now. So I'm just reading this one to myself before I go into the detail, because it might be about a specific application. So we've got an applicant who wants to apply in August. They're confident their business meets the criteria, but their concern is because this is a new country, they need some kind of mentoring, guidance, or responsibility. Okay, so that's the sort of thing I mentioned already. This is your business, but we do provide additional services. Rather than me bleating on, Nick, the additional services we provide. Anything you'd like to add or mention on that while I'm just reading the questions?
Yeah. So the core program is, someone applies, they go through the endorsement process, get a letter of endorsement. The only mandatory checkpoints following that are at 12 and 24 months. So, if you look at it that way, people could be left to their own devices for 12 months at a time. However, what we do is we can provide sort of monthly mentoring sessions to make sure that people keep on track, both from a business context and for the next stage as well of your visa journey, because that's what it is. Getting the endorsement. I think Richard says this in a lot of the material that we put out there. Getting the endorsement and getting your visa is only the start of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got a long way to go after that.
Yeah,
so you can have monthly mentoring sessions. You could have specific sessions with experts, whether that's on sales, marketing, operations, people issues. So those are all available through our extra added value services.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I'm going to add this in briefly now as well. We've got some really exciting stuff coming up over the next few months. We're going to be launching a new website that's a part of our business support program. So please watch this space for more details. We'll do a dedicated session on this. You may have noticed if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see the name Innovator Pulse. That gives you an insight in what's to come. So please do go to our YouTube channel, have a look for Innovator Pulse, which is where you're watching this now. Obviously, follow it. We do put regular videos on. Follow us on LinkedIn as well. I'm just going to drop Nick's page up very, very quickly. There you go. So if you go on LinkedIn, search for Nick Roach, you will find Nick. On the right, you'll see Nick's and mine, of course, webpage, innovationinternational.com. But if you need extra help, go to that webpage. You will see in the 3 words on the top, it says support guides. If you click on support guides, you can download a free guide to the Innovator Founder Same Business route, the Innovator Founder New Business route, and a guide on how to write business plans. Nick, we've run over by 8 minutes. This is a record for us, but such an important subject. So thank you so much for your time. Hopefully a lot of the people watching this both live and back. Oh, we've got one more question coming very, very quickly. Customer validation, I've done it extensively through WhatsApp group. How do I include in the plan? So last comment, you got that one in just in time. I'd have a section on your plan that just talks about who you've spoken to, what they've specified as their pain point, what the solution is. Yes, you can add testimonials. Please do.
Yeah, you could add that as an annex to the business plan. If you want to put a lot of detail in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would extract the key points and put those in the business plan.
Fantastic.
Nick, then add a lot of the details in annex.
Yeah, and again, last question for Antonio. You're not going to believe this, but my furniture has actually just arrived. So I'm going to be a couple of seconds. Antonio, yes, we do accept transfers from existing endorsing bodies. Just to finish off very quickly, back to the header page. Next week, we've got Keith Atkins talking about all things edutech. Keith is also one of our assessors, and he's also going to talk about how to get in to schools and establish educational establishments. I'm rushing this because my delivery's here. Murphy's Law is true. Everything that could go wrong, well, it didn't go wrong, but the delivery is just on time. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you for your time. We hope to see you next week for next week's Tuesday Morning Coffee Club. Enjoy your week.